Greetings scholars, Wormwood here. In the last lesson, we read about the much shortened down tales of Mother Meng and Dou Jun, as well as their means of teaching their children. We also learned how to wield the characters xi to indicate the past, you to have to exist, wu to not have or non-existence, and the adverb ju or. As always, if you need to review, go back and rewatch the previous episode before continuing with this one. First things first, I need to do some housekeeping. Last time I messed up on some of the Vietnamese readings, again, specifically these three, here with the correct readings, mu, mao, zhu, zhu, and wu, ngu. Fingers crossed I'll get all the readings right this episode. With that out of the way, let's go over last time's homework, shall we? First of all, I want to say good job to all of you who handed in their homework. Some of you have been in the comments asking for answer sheets. This is quite understandable, however I am principally against providing quote-unquote correct English or indeed any language oversettings of classical Chinese works. Not only because I'm a lazy piece of shit, but also the very nature of classical Chinese itself makes it nigh hopeless to give but one spot-on translation. The best anyone can hope for is an interpretation, which will vary vastly on who is doing the interpretation and for what audience. To take an example, a poet writing for other poets might spend some time to get the meter and rhymes just right, while being less than literal with what the text is saying, while a linguistic scholar might focus on which words are used and how, with less regard to making the text flow smoothly. A philosopher would want to put more weight on the ideas presented in the work, while a historian would want to make connections with the ebbs and flows of time, and so on. That said, some interpretations will be closer to the mark than others. For example, this scholar, name redacted, in the Chinese way, we do not single anyone out for humiliation here, rendered the passage 子不学,断机杼 as her children didn't study, so she broke her loom and shuttle. Now, this translation is not wrong if we look at the sentence in isolation. 子 can after all mean child, children, son, as well as daughter, depending on the situation. However, since we have on record that Master Meng was an only child, at least no sibling is ever mentioned, we should understand 子 here as singular, child or son. Another example worth noting is 名俱扬, which someone translated as both Mr. Crack of Squallow Mountain and Menchie's mother were well known for raising up their children. Now, this is a bit further into the wrong side of the spectrum for the following reasons. Number one, Ming means name or fame. It can also be a verb to be called, but 俱扬 is not a name, so this interpretation is highly unlikely. Number two, Yang means to raise up or lift up, here referring back to Ming, and if someone's name is elevated, it means that they have become famous or well known. Thirdly, Ju is an adverb meaning all, which we can understand either broadly as the Dou family as a whole, successful sons bring honor to their father after all, or narrowly to the 5 sons as they all made a name for themselves, that is, became famous. Hopefully this cleared up this section a little bit without me having to resort to a single correct translation. Alright, that's it for reviewing the homework. If you have any further questions, leave them in the comments and I'll get to them as soon as I can. Before we get going with today's episode, however, I have a quick announcement to make. Since the first episode, I've been getting requests to add readings for the other Chinese languages. I did explain why I only went with modern Mandarin in the first episode, but I am very sympathetic to those whose native tongue is not Mandarin. The main reason for not including the others was the matter of confusing clutter. There's already a lot of text on screen, and I didn't want to give people migraines staring at the great text wall of China. Because I am #smoothbrain, I totally overlooked the easy fix to this problem. Add the other Chinese readings as a closed caption. It took someone pointing this solution out for me to even consider it, so that's what I'll be doing going forward, and I've already added Cantonese and Southern Min readings retroactively to the first 2 episodes. If you don't believe me, go and have a look. Go ahead, anything to boost those ratings. Now that that's out of the way, get your Kung Fu tea ready and sit your asses down because I'ma do you a learnin'. 养不教父之过教不严师之惰子不学非所宜幼不学老何为养不教父之过教不严师之惰子不学非所宜幼不学老何为养 to rear, to raise, to foster, to bring up. From yang, sheep, and si, to feed, which shows a fancy rice bowl with a lid. Nerd note! This character has two readings with related but different meanings. When read as shi, it means to eat. When read as si, it means to feed someone or something. Even the ancient Chinese thought this could be confusing, so si was later written like this to avoid confusion. But in older texts, the two meanings use the same character, and once again, you need to rely on context and guesswork to figure out which reading makes more sense. In the case of this character, yang, it makes more sense for it to be read as si, to feed, because if you've ever wanted to raise sheep, the first step is to see to it that they have enough to eat. Furthermore, the Chinese felt that raising animals was the same as raising children. Both need food and shelter and occasionally clothes. Therefore, this word was broadened bitwise to mean to rear, to raise, foster, anything or anyone. You likely guessed it already, but yang also gives the reading. Fu, father. A drawing of a hand holding, well, something. The old explanation is that it is a staff of headship, but today's lawmasters instead see a stone or flint axe head. Both can be seen as markers of manly might, either working with a flint axe to feed their family or wielding a rod to teach and punish their children. Guo. To stride over, to overstep, mistake, oversight. From our old friend the road radical, chuo, and gua, the old pictographic form of gu, bone, showing bones laid out in a zigzag pattern. The original meaning was to walk or stride over something, like, say, a bunch of bones lying on the ground. The mouth radical was added later, turning gua into kuai, which means slanted or crooked, especially of the mouth. Chinese morals and ethics are all about the middle way or golden mean, so while being overly frugal makes one stingy, being too giving makes one wasteful. If you follow the crooked path and overstep what is right, then you have made a mistake. Both gua and kuai also give us the reading. Yan, hard, stern, also father. From nie, three mouths linked together, which means wordy, talkative, go figure, over gan, a hand wielding a spear fighting a wild boar, which means to dare or to make bold. If you dare to talk back to your stern father, then he'll give you something to cry about. The meaning father comes from the ancient Chinese ideal that mothers should be loving and kind, referred to as mu ci, while fathers should be aloof and stern, called fu yan. Thus, yan, the stern one, became a synonym for father. Gan also gives us the reading. Shi, teacher. From dui, a mound or hill, and za, to surround. In the olden days, troops were often stationed on hills, with a wooden palisade around the camp. The root meaning is army, but in the Zhou dynasty, shi was also a high-ranking title, somewhat like today's Secretary of Defense. When the centralized Zhou government broke down, leading to the age of spring and autumn, many highborn formed mostly self-standing states. Now, every state had its own shi, and as the Cold War of the spring and autumn heated up into the age of the warring states, understandably, warcraft became a hot topic. This led to the title shi becoming bitwise watered down, first to mean anyone skilled in the ways of war, then anyone teaching this subject, and finally to mean teacher of any kind. We can also think of za as giving the reading. Duo, lazy, idle, careless. from sin heart, and a much shortened down character duo, which means to fall or to sink. Sloth makes your heart and mind sink, and you become idle and careless. I somehow find it oddly fitting that they cut out half of the element duo, like the ancient scribes couldn't be bothered to write it out in full. Even the character composition itself is lazy. Gosh, there's just so many layers to this character. I think you guessed it already, but duo also gives us the reading. Fei, not is not. A drawing of a pair of wings. Why do wings mean not? Well, clearly, Cangjie simply liked chicken legs over chicken wings. Jokes aside, this character began as but another way to write the word fei, to fly. It was borrowed for the same sounding negative copula fei, is not, isn't, with the new meaning eventually overwriting the old. Så, stead, stow, place, that which. From hu, a door, and jin, an axe. Everything has its steed, and the axis is by the door, so you know where to find it. This meaning gradually became more abstract, with so becoming a grammatic particle that turns verbs into nominal phrases, often rendered as some variant of that which, but more on that in the grammar section. E, fitting, seemly, right. A drawing of an ancient sacrificial bronze vessel called a zu, which was shaped like a table or a cutting board, with two juicy slabs of meat, here represented by duo, on top of it. Meat was a fitting offering to one's ancestors. The slabs of meat are nowhere to be seen in the modern form because youngsters don't care about their ancestors these days. Shame. Dang shame. Yo, wee, young, small. From yao, meaning tiny or little, and li, strength or might. One explanation is that kids aren't very strong, so little strength is the same as a child. I, on the other hand, like to think of it as tiny but mighty. If you've ever seen a crying toddler taking a whole room full of adults hostage, you know what I'm talking about. Yao also gives the reading. Lao, old, aged, elderly. A drawing of an old man with long hair leaning on a walking stick. I say, Mithrandir, is that you?
You would not part an old man from his walking stick.
Oh shit, no, it's Pai Mei! Nerd note! Lao also has a more narrow definition of 70 years of age. The character includes a walking stick because in ancient China, the emperor would grant a walking stick called a Wang Zhang, king staff, or Jiu Zhang, turtle dove staff, on account of the turtle dove-like handle to anyone celebrating their 70th birthday as a sign of respect for their high age and wisdom, and as a very early form of government-funded elder care. I just want to point out that while making the art assets, I confused Jiu Zhang with He Zhang, crane staff, another unrelated symbol of venerable age, so I made the head of Pai Mei's staff a crane and not a turtle dove. Yeah, my bad. He, what, why, how. A drawing of a man carrying a polearm over his shoulder. This character at first meant to carry, however, like Fei, it was borrowed for the same sounding question pronoun he, what. A mouth radical was tacked on later to show that the character was sound only. Confusingly, the meaning to carry, he, is now written with a grass radical on top of he. What? In the grammar section, we'll take a closer look at how to use the question pronoun he, but before that, we got one more new character to go. Wei, to do, make, become. From zhua, showing a hand with the palm pointing downward, and xiang, elephant. The old standardized version still shows the hand on top, which technically makes the modern full-form character a simplified version. Yep, character simplification gets pretty messy at times. The explanation offered on the University of Hong Kong's website is that ancient Chinese used elephants as labor animals, thus hand and elephant means to do, to make, to work. Another possible explanation is that the elephant gives the reading, representing an old area word for elephant. Compare with Vietnamese voi. Either way, apart from being a verb to do, to make, and so on, Wei is also the classical Chinese linking verb, but more on that in the grammar section. And speaking of which... So, the last episode ended up getting pretty rushed, since I opened up my big pie hole and said I'd have it out by Christmas. Looking back, it could have done with a lot more polishing, but the biggest oversight was that I meant to introduce the particle ye in that episode. I just kinda forgot. Oh well, better late than sorry, as my grandma's pet goldfish used to say. So let's have a look at... In the first episode, I mentioned that the line 性相近,习相远 is a near quote from the Analect. Here you have the full quote. Let's play a quick game of spot the difference. 性相近也,习相远也. If you picked the two characters ye, congratulations, you are correct. However, if you are familiar with modern Mandarin, this placement probably looks a little bit odd to you. See, in modern Mandarin, ye is an adverb meaning also, and so we'd expect it to appear before a verb. In classical Chinese, on the other hand, ye is a sentence final grammatical particle. Its most common role is to mark nominal sentences, or in other words, to express that A is B, specifically that A equals B. Let's illustrate with a simple example. 子人也, child, man, ye. While 子 means child, in classical Chinese texts it is often used as a title of respect, so master or somewhat like English formal you or sir. 人 means man or person, and finally 也 is used to mark that 子 is or equals 人. Thus, 子人也 can be readily understood as the master is a man, or indeed the child is human, if we read 子 as child. One common usage of this construction is to give word book definitions. So, for example, the 说文解字 entry for yuan says simply 远辽也, 辽 being a synonym for yuan, both meaning far. You will also see ye at the end of verb phrases, where it marks that the deed being done is ongoing, ever-abiding and or unchanging, as in the following example. 道远也, way, far,也. The way is far. While it is true that a noun and a verb or stative verb form a grammatically complete sentence in classical Chinese, iking ye at the end does the following. It stresses that the stative verb is not a passing thing, but rather an everlasting feature of the noun earlier. Think of it as adding weight to an English sentence. The way is far. We often see ye used with the negative, like in the following example. 燕山之人不学也. Swallow peaks, possessive, man, not, learn, ye. The men of the Swallow Peaks do not engage in learning. The unlikeness with or without ye can be low-key, and truth be told, is sometimes very hard to overset into English. But here, the easiest way to look at it is that those who dwell in the Swallow Peaks do, emphasis, not study, as in they never have, and the likelihood of them ever doing so is slim indeed. To hammer the point home some more, we might go so far as to claim that the men of the Swallow Peaks equals not study. There are a few more uses of ye, but knowing these two will be enough for now. We won't be seeing ye in our main text anytime soon, but I will be making frequent use of it in example sentences. Now let's go back to the quote from the Analects. 性相近也,习相远也. Nature each other close, ye. Practice each other far, ye. Let's ask ourselves, does the addition of ye change the meaning in any way? Write your answers in the comments and we'll have a look at them together in the next episodes. What's this, extra homework? It's more likely than you think. Keep in mind that even though ye in many ways work like the English linking verb to be, it is not in fact a linking verb, or a verb of any kind for that matter. Instead, the true classical Chinese linking verb is, drumroll please, First things first, what the heck is a linking verb? A linking verb, also known as a copula or a copula verb, is a verb that links a subject with a predicate, the part of a sentence that describes the subject. Wow, that was a couple of long words, hehe. So allow me to illustrate with an English example sentence. Miss Brown is a teacher. Here the verb to be is the copula, linking the subject, Miss Brown, with the predicate, a teacher. In classical Chinese, the copula verb is wei, and as you can see on the screen here, it appears between the subject and predicate, just like in English. A, wei, be. So far, so good. However, unlike the English linking verb to be, which is static, wei is more fleeting and often carries a hint of being for a set amount of time, for a clear goal in a certain role, or even to be thought of as filling such a role. Again, let me give you an example. 孟子为师, Master Meng, copula, teacher. Unlike Miss Brown, who is a teacher, that is, teacher is in a way part of her identity, the classical Chinese sentence would be understood as Master Meng is acting as or being viewed as a teacher, not that Master Meng equals teacher. Since the root meaning of wei is to do, we can also think of this in terms of Mengzi doing the work of a teacher, rather than him simply being one. If we instead use the particle ye from earlier, 孟子师也, we would then get a sentence closer to the English example, that is, Master Meng is or equals a teacher. Now, suppose you are a subversive element, like say a Taoist or a Mohist, who rejects the second sage as your lord and savior, how then would you say, Master Meng is not my teacher? Well, we've gone over a few negative particles by now. So, to follow my therapist's advice, let's bring all of this negativity out into the light and try to make some sense of it. First, we have bu, which we use to negate almost all types of verbs, including stative verbs, adverbs, and co-verbs. Next up is wu, which is the negative equivalent to the verb you, to have, to exist. In other words, we do not write bu you for doesn't have, but instead we must replace you with wu. And lastly, fei. Fei is actually a contraction, like isn't in English. Specifically, it's a contraction of bu wei, to not be or is not. Nerd note! Wei was the linking verb in archaic Chinese, the earliest stages of Chinese we have on record from the Shang dynasty and early Zhou dynasty. While it sounds identical to the classical Chinese copula in modern Mandarin, the two are actually unrelated. Any which way, when said quickly, bu wei sounded like the word to fly, fei, and so the character for to fly was used to write the contraction. When wei fell out of use as the copula replaced by wei and ye, fei stuck around as the negative copula. Thus, for our purposes, fei is the negative form of wei, just like how wu is the negative form of you. To say that A is not B in classical Chinese, we simply insert fei between the two. So A fei B, or A is not B. Fei can also be used to negate nominal sentences with ye, in which case the formula looks like this. Thus, 我非羊也, I, me, myself, isn't sheep ye, which we can read as I am not a sheep. However, if we wanted to negate the following sentence, 父严也, father strict ye, we would not use fei to negate yan. Why? If you guessed, because yan is a stative verb, so we must negate it with bu instead. Then you are bang on the money, my friend. Well done. On that note, unlike yo, you can actually negate wei with bu, like in the following. 苟夫不善教, 乃子不为善. If father not good at teach, then child not do good. When this combination occurs, you can safely assume that wei is being used as a regular verb to make, to do, to become, and not as the copula to be or to act as. Thus, we can understand this example sentence to mean, if the father is bad at teaching what is right or wrong, then the child will not go on to do good deeds. Hopefully you now have a pretty good grasp of how to use the negative copula fei, and to answer the question I asked earlier, the sentence Master Meng is not my teacher can be written as 孟子非我之师也. Now, on to the next thing on the list. Quick recap. As we saw in the vocab section, 所 means stead, style, place. This meaning bitwise took on a grammatic dimension with a couple of related but different uses. One of the more common ones is turning a verb into a noun phrase, that is, a phrase that is treated grammatically as a noun, like so. Thus, if yan means to speak, 所言 means that which is spoken of, or what is spoken of. Yi means to be fitting or seemly, 所以 means what is proper, that which is suitable. Shan means to be good, so 所善 becomes that which is good. These aren't full sentences, however, so let's see a few longer examples. 人所学道也, man 所 study the way 也. Note that 人 man is also used in a generic way to talk of people other than oneself, so we might think of this sentence not as the man studies the way, but rather as they study the way, or others study the Tao, but I don't. Another example, 师所言无过, teacher 所 say have not, mistake. What the teacher said is not wrong, literally is without mistake. And one more example for good measure. 记住孟母所断也, Lumen shuttle Mother Meng 所 break 也. The Lumen shuttle is what Mother Meng broke. Thus, we can think of 所 as answering an unspoken question. What is the Tao? Answer, the thing that the others are studying. What is not wrong? Answer, what the teacher said. What did Mother Meng break? Answer, her loom and shuttle. And so on. 所 is often combined with other characters like 知, 以, 为, but we'll have plenty of time to explore these relationships in future episodes. He is the most common classical Chinese question pronoun. There are a whole bunch of others, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. You can think of it as equivalent to English what, but depending on the context, it can also be read as which, how, why, or where. When used with a noun, he is placed in front of the noun, and often means either what in the sense of what kind or what sort of. Thus, 孟子何人, Master Meng, what man, is best understood as what kind of person is Master Meng, and not who is Master Meng. He can also mean which, as in which one out of a bunch. 道人迁河山, way, man, move, what, barrow. Quick note, a Daoren, or man of the Tao, is a Taoist priest. To which fell out of all the peaks in China did the Taoist move. When used with a verb, he is also placed in front of it, even when he is technically the object. This is one very important exception to classical Chinese's otherwise very strict SVO word order. Thus, we see 师和教 for what does the teacher teach and not 师教和. Also, we would see 羊和食 for what do sheep eat and not 羊食和. Before moving on, let's have a quick look at the combination 和为, since it does appear in our main text today. Literally, it means what do, but it has a few different uses. Let's see some of them put into action, shall we? First off is 子和为, master what do. This sentence is quite straightforward, and can be read as simply what do you, sir, do, as in what sort of job or enterprise are you engaged in. Now, let's look at the longer and somewhat different example. 苟子不学，父母乃何为? If child not study, father, mother, then what do? Here, 子 means child because it's used alongside father and mother. 父母 literally means father, mother, but in English is usually translated simply as parents. Parents have been fronted, placed before 乃, then, in order to emphasize parents in this sentence. What are the parents to do? As you can see, in this instance, 何为 is used to ask the question, what do we do about X, or what should be done about X? If the child doesn't study, then what are the parents supposed to do about it? However, 何为 can also be used to ask why type questions, like so. 子何为师? Master, what do teacher? Why are you, sir, a teacher? If you have trouble connecting what do with why, then you can instead think of 何为 as how become, or for what reason did you decide to do X. As we've already seen, 为 can mean many things even as a regular verb. To do, to make are just its most common meanings, but it can also mean to become or to act as. Thus, the combination 何为 can be used in many instances, either to ask what someone is doing, but also to ask why or what is to be done about a certain situation. So, what do you think the text is trying to convey when it says 又不学老何为? Let me know your thoughts on this sentence in the comments. Remember, engaging with the text is the single best way to learn how to read and understand classical Chinese. While the TCC is meant for children, I like to think that today's section at least also addresses the parent and teacher, since it goes out of its way to spell out their plights toward the children and or students. The text also stresses that it is not enough to simply raise young, a child, that is, give them food to eat and clothes to wear, but that parents also must make sure to educate their child. This is all part of Confucian role ethics. So, what are role ethics? I'm going to make the very bold assumption that most of my viewers are contemporary Westerners. Shout out to my time-traveling Aztec Eagle warrior bros in the audience. Piali. Now, Westerners generally believe that morals and ethics are universal, or that an action is good or bad regardless of who performs it. This idea owes a lot to Christian philosophy, everyone being equal before God, which later became everyone is equal before the law. Traditional Chinese, that is Confucian morals, on the other hand, laid more weight on someone following their ethical role in society. The technical name for this is role ethics. Great shock, I know. This means that people should act according to the role they occupy in society. So it wasn't enough that you were a father just by passing the, shall we say, practical exam, but you also had to act the way a father should. Now, in Confucius' day, the centralized government of the Zhou dynasty had already been gnawed away at for hundreds of years, to the point that only the bare bones were left. Mighty lords ruled their lands on their own, with loyalty to the Son of Heaven being little more than an afterthought. These lords often waged war against each other to biggin their holdings, and yes, biggin is a word, I looked it up, meaning that the average fellow might go to bed in Qi only to wake up in Chu the next day. This time period is poetically known as the Age of Spring and Autumn. A pretty name for sure, but for Wong taxpayer it sucked the big one. In such, to put it mildly, interesting times, even if you could afford to send your kid to school, the school might just get closed down next week because the city was being besieged by your neighbors. Thus, Confucius thought it was better for parents to take an active role in their children's education, since if you didn't educate your kids, no one else would, with the added benefit that if you managed to get just one son into a government position, they'd be able to lift all of the family out of poverty. This generational trauma is why Asian parents to this day are highly concerned with their children's academic success, because over 2,000 years later, somewhere way in the back of their minds, the shadow of Master Kung still lingers, whispering to them that their child's poor grades are a reflection of their own failures as a parent and a human being.
Emotional damage!
We will go further into detail about the Confucian system of morals, in particular the Sanggang Wuchang, in future episodes, but I think you've all had quite enough of me prattling on for one episode, so let's wrap this up, shall we? And that's the end of episode 3. You probably noticed a lack of significant chunkiness in this episode. In preparation for this episode, I had a chat with a good friend of mine who advised against increasing the difficulty too steeply, so we'll do a few more episodes with this format before ramping up the difficulty. And now, here's today's main homework. Unsurprisingly, it's translating today's text. And since some of you really like homework, I've decided to start uploading exercise sheets for each episode on my Patreon page. These will include grammar exercises as well as character sheets, so you can practice writing classical Chinese from the comfort of your own home. And yes, I will be uploading these for episodes 1 and 2 as well, rest assured. Remember to like and subscribe, join the Chinese Merchant Guild by supporting me on Patreon, and stay tuned for more classical Chinese content. You're all truly wonderful. Until next time, scholars.